Hey everybody, so welcome to lesson 3 from a 3-part series for learning how to sew. And in this part we're going to talk about troubleshooting, and one of the main things we're going to discuss is tension, which is usually the big contributor as to why people have problems sewing. The bottom thread is bunching and it causes issues. So I've brought with me, or actually we're in my sewing studio so it's already here, but I have with me is a metal bobbin, which is quite full. And if you remember from lesson number 1, the reason that we use metal is because of the weight, and it helps aid in sewing when you get towards the bottom of your thread. If you have a plastic bobbin, which I've advised to only use in an emergency, and that's my preference, is that once you get to the very, very end of the bobbin thread, there is no more weight inside the bobbin housing to help it come out consistently. So that is why I prefer to use metal. So I'm going to go ahead and thread my machine, and I have with me today a piece of scrap broadcloth fabric, and I'm going to show you how thin it is. I've folded it in half to give it some form of thickness, but it is pretty thin to start off with. So I'm going to make the mistake of doing with this thin of fabric a number 3 tension. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew a straight line and show you what happens when you sew with the incorrect tension number. I am not going to do a back and forth for this demonstration, but I am going to show you up close here in the video. Let me get this even closer so it can focus in. Do you see those dots? And do you see the slight gap in between the thread and the fabric? These dots mean that the right side of the fabric is showing through on the wrong side. The consistency of the stitching is not consistent. So the tension number 3 that we just used is incorrect. Let's do a higher number, which I said actually I think in lesson 1 or 2 or both. The thinner the fabric, the higher the tension number. So let's go ahead and put this to about a 5.5, and then we will sew right next to this first line another line, so we may compare the difference between too low of tension and correct tension. Okay. Here we go. Okay, here we go. So we were just looking at this line. See how you can see those dots every time the needle went in? Here, we don't see them because the dot is inserted consistently. Is that a word? Consistently. In between each one. I've just made it a word. So we have the top thread showing through on the bottom. We have nothing showing because the consistency and the tension number 5.5 for this thin of fabric is correct. Okay, now we're going to move on to a big no-no, but it's troubleshooting number 2.